What's up guys, John Ross for Us Racing here with another video. As you can see in the background, I've got all of the rear body work, fuel cell and all that stuff stripped out of the B Mod. So what we're working on right now is I'm building a left rear underslung bar. It's going to be a bolt-on removable setup. So before I go into too much depth with that and show you guys what I'm doing and kind of my process of designing and building this thing, I wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of what a overslung versus underslung chassis means and how that relates to this project that we're working on. So here you see the back end of our B Mod chassis. Now this medieval chassis modified is a overslung design, meaning that the rear clip, everything behind the main roll hoop there, all of it exists above the axle. The opposite of that would be an underslung car, which would still have the support for holding the fuel cell and whatnot that goes above the axle, but it would also have bars that extend from the lower frame of the chassis, go under the axle, and then come back up and connect. What we're doing here is we're converting the left side of the car only to an underslung design with a removable underslung bar. So what I've done so far is I've welded on some double shear tabs right here, and then I welded on another set. It's kind of in the shadows, but you can see them under there, underneath the J-bar mount. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this crossbar here that is in front of the fuel cell. I'm going to put tabs on there so we can have a lateral bar that goes up to provide some lateral support for that underslung bar. So why are we doing this? Well, that kind of goes back to really the differences between an overslung and an underslung chassis from a functional standpoint. Now, there's a lot of reasons that this chassis was designed originally with this over-rail, overslung design rather than an underslung. It's lighter, it's simpler, and it doesn't have anything sitting underneath the left rear axle that would inhibit the movement of that axle and limit the amount of droop that you can get. With modern dirt track suspension technology, there's a lot of articulation happening at the rear axle and especially on that left rear corner. So a lot of older chassis that were designed before all of that came about have a pretty shallow angle to that underslung bar on the left rear. And if you try to convert them to a modern suspension setup, the axle will actually hit the bar that goes under the axle. Now, in recent years, there's been more developments in chassis design, and a lot of newer chassis have gone back to the underslung design. Reason being, one, it provides more stiffness, more support for this whole rear section. It provides more rigidity in the areas where the rear suspension mounts. But another big reason, and the reason why we're adding this removable underslung bar, is not structural, but is related to weight distribution and lead location. Now you want as much left rear weight as you can possibly get on these cars to get them to drive off of the corner and have good traction, especially on a B Mod where we're limited to a 3-link rear suspension setup, and so we can't do some of the high-tech stuff that the A Mod and late model guys do on that side to generate dig. Now I've got a little chunk of lead. It's kind of washed out, but it's sitting over there underneath kind of the driver's door bars. And I had another piece over there in front of the J-bar mount, but I want to get more over here on the left rear. So that's why we're designing this bar that'll go under the left rear axle, and we'll bolt a couple big chunks of lead to it right behind the axle. So as I mentioned, one of the challenges involved with this is going to be making sure that that axle doesn't hit that bar. So like I said, we've got these two mounts already set up, and we're going to do a little bit of cardboard aided design, a little bit of CAD. I'm going to create a cardboard template for where that bar is going to run. Then we'll run the axle through its motion, and we'll probably even set the car down on the ground to make sure that the template doesn't hit the ground when the car is at its minimum ride height. After that, we'll use that template to create the bent tube and weld some slugs up in it, and then we'll have our underslung bar. But first, I got to finish up with these mounting tabs for that cross brace. So I'm going to clean the paint off of this cross tube here, and I'm going to weld up another set of those double shear tabs. Alright, so that's all the welding done for now. We've got the tabs on the car for the underslung mount. Next I'm going to take some measurements and then I'm going to bust out some pieces of cardboard and we're going to make a template for our bent tube. Alright, so as you can see we've got our cardboard template drawn up. I just took some thin strips of cardboard that are the same width as the tube that we're going to use and I kind of clamped them up and measured angles and marked them up. So now we can remove that and tape it all up so it can act as one piece. And then I'm going to use that as my template to bend the tube that's going to act as our left rear underslung bar. Well, as you can see, we skipped ahead a few steps here. We turned that cardboard template into an actual tube here with the help of a handy dandy tube bender. Unfortunately, the tube bender is located at a different location where I don't currently have permission or rights to film at. So, yeah, that's by the magic of editing, there's that piece. We've already drilled the hole and welded the slug and the cap on that end. So now that goes on the front. We're going to bolt that in and then I'll swing it up to match that mount there at the back. Now, if I was smarter, I probably would have bent the tube and drilled the holes and then attached the mounts to match that, but, you know, no one ever accused me of having good foresight when it comes to this kind of thing. Real quick before we move on to a montage of me finishing this thing up, I'd just like to thank everybody that tuned into our last video about the engine teardown. You know, I wish I could tear down an engine every week on this channel because it seems like that's what you guys like to see. But hopefully this little bit more niche, you know, specifically dirt track related content isn't alienating too many people. Oh, and just like that, once again, through the magic of editing, we got this bar installed. Now there's still one more thing left to do here, and that's finish up this bolt-on brace. Right now we've just kind of got a piece in there as a stand-in, but obviously that's got to be connected to a tab that we're going to weld onto the side of this bar here. And before I do that, got a couple things I got to do. One, I got to clean up this gear oil spill down here, because apparently painter's tape doesn't form a good seal against gear oil. And also I want to set the car down on the ground and make sure that all our measurements were correct and this thing doesn't hit the ground when the chassis is at ride height. Obviously that would be kind of a buzzkill, and I should have checked that probably after just tacking things up, but you know, cut once, cry once, or however that saying goes. Well, as you can see, we got the car sitting on the ground. One thing I want to point out, you can see where I've got the axle shaft pulled out of the left rear hub here. On cars like this that have a locked differential or spool and a whole lot of rear steer as the suspension travels, anytime you're doing any sort of adjustments that involve measuring ride heights or scale numbers or anything like that, you always want to do that because otherwise the car's not going to settle down on that corner like it's supposed to. I actually, just to make things easier to manipulate, I just removed the spring and shock from the left rear side anyway and manipulated the car with the jack to get it to the right ride height, because without the lead, without the battery, without the fuel cell, all the weight that would be on the back of this car, it wasn't going to sit down to the right ride height anyway. Now, you can see we're pretty damn close to the ground over here, but sitting at ride height here, we still have about an inch of ground clearance. That may not sound like a lot, but keep in mind we usually run the shock on this side with only about half an inch or so of travel left before bottoming out. So I don't think that there's any way under normal circumstances that that's going to touch the ground. It may turn into a pain in the ass for loading and unloading the car, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That's one more box ticked off. In the meantime, I didn't really want to suscept you guys to any more of my very mediocre welding skills. So I've been working on this little deal here, this bolt-on brace bar, without filming every aspect of that process. One thing I will point out is the reason why there's heims on here that are welded in place rather than basically just using a swedge tube or something here is because the rules specifically say no adjustable underslung bars. Now, I don't think that they're really talking about adjustable brace bars for your underslung. I think it's more so using a heim on your actual underslung to adjust the amount of droop and kind of use it as a bump stop. But that being said, I don't want to give the tech guys any reasons to mess with me in the event that I do run really good this year. So that's how we did it. Well, there you have it. One complete bolt-on underslung assembly, along with that lateral brace bar and the spacers for that little heim to fit inside our double shear tabs. So all we got to do now is give this thing a quick spritz of paint, primer gray of course, and get it installed on the car. Although actually I think I'm going to do some other things to the car, including stripping it down completely and giving all the welds on the car a quick once over before we go that far. I got to admit, putting this thing on the ground with the wheels and tires on it kind of gave me the same feeling that I assume your pet dog might get when they see you grab a leash. I thought we were going for walkies. But nope, still got a lot of work to do on this thing to get it ready for race season. And as much of that as I can possibly show you, I'll bring to you right here on the channel. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you all in the next one.